My name is Benjamin. I'm the Foreign Minister of the Republic of South Sudan. It's wonderful to see Her Excellency Johnson here as lead, and indeed President Mahama. The issue is about the fragile state, and my question really is to need the comment of the two presidents, if possible. As you know, South Sudan is a member of the G7 or G7 plus, as they say. And the aim is to invest in the people so that there is prosperity and peace among our own citizens. And to do that, peace and security leading to stability is essential. And to do that, you need delivery of services to the people. As President Mahama properly said, you might be flowing in oil, and if you are not careful, you'll get a large number of your citizens having nothing, and a few becoming multimillionaires. As said by a few while ago, South Sudan was supposed to launch the New Deal by February this year, but because of the crisis we went into, we had to postpone it because we have the chair of the G7 in launching the New Deal for the G7+. But the problem, I think, and I hope both the leadership here must have realized, is that sometimes with our partners, there seems to be an element of conditionality, conditions put to it. We in South Sudan see no reason why we wouldn't launch the New Deal, despite the problems we have. But it comes out because of the recent crisis that took place. Then everything is suspended, which I think this approach is not appropriate in the circumstances. Because if you look at South Sudan, it's a huge country of about 10 states in it. It's bigger than France, for example. You get 3 states out of 10, that's where the problem is. You have the chunk of land. The other 7 states are normal. Government issues are running smoothly. Why would you then postpone? Simply because there seems to be a crisis of part of the country. And we're telling the Americans, you are in Iraq now. When it is in turmoil, you haven't stopped what you would want to do. So the problem of the New Deal, frankly speaking, is a wonderful solution in replacing the Millennium Development Goals that we wanted. But if you are going to wait until you get absolute peace, then you begin the process, then we are getting it wrong. Because in order even to bring that stability, you need to implement what you believe in the New Deal. So what is the way out for this? Here, case of South Sudan, what you read in the news, as if the whole country is in turmoil, is down the road. But the country has done well. We have a peace process going. 30 days after the incident, it's already cessation of hostilities signed. We didn't continue into 25, 30 years like we saw in other countries in the peace process. A month after the trouble. Why not proceed with the program? And that's where we have the problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
They are peace. But we suffered a deficit. We had a drop in prices of our 2 leading exports, cocoa and gold. And then we suffered some of our expenditure in 2012 during the elections. We're trying to bring that down and bring the deficit down. And yet our partners are holding on to multi-donor budget support because they say you have a budget deficit. And this support is going to critical areas to help us meet the MDGs. We have an accelerated maternal mortality program to be able to meet the 2015 MDGs. There's a hold on all these program support because of a deficit. And so it's not even conflict alone, even when the country is at total peace. I mean, yes, we're implementing adjustment to bring the deficit down, but I don't bring the deficit down in 1 year. It takes a couple of years to turn the deficit around. But in that period, it's being made worse by holding on to support of about $500 million, you know. And so there's a lack of understanding, you know, sometimes between ourselves and our partners. And I think that point you made is good. South Sudan is not all in flames. it's a certain portion of it. Must the rest of the country sit and wait because of, you know, an isolated portion being in conflict? I guess you have a very good question there.
Let me add to that.
I think Chiba made the point that an important element of responding to vulnerabilities in state is for partnership institutions to change their own procedures. That means that you cannot apply conditionalities, procurement rules that are formulated in conditions that are normal to states that are going through difficulties. We've challenged the African Development Bank and the World Bank to change their processes if they're going to be more responsive to countries in these particular circumstances. And we've been seeing some changes. So you have to press on. You know, don't let them off the hook. So keep after them and say you want to start the process of your fragile state program. You're going to make sure that you try to maintain stability, and with their support you can do it. So we have to keep fighting those conventional and traditional methods of doing things until we can bring the reform that's so necessary.
Thank you very much.
Clap for that.
My name is Odile Hardy. I'm an EU journalist, Brussels-based from France, and I'm covering for several media here, including a new one started by one of my colleagues, you know, from Rwanda. It's called Yambola, and I have several questions. First of all, congratulations for this report, and also I'd like to know whether you plan some coordination with other development actors like USAID or Kuwait Fund or others, and that's my first question. Also, in the business forum just across the city, there was a lot of talk yesterday about the agribusiness and also about education. Now, about education, they were saying that there is no point in having so many people graduates in humanities if you have so very few engineers. So what is your view on how to make education more adjustable to the needs of the countries? And as far as agribusiness, I'd like to have your views on this, because of course there are maybe people from outside who want to come and grab your lands and all this. Thank you very much.
Let me start with agribusiness. One of the things we are pushing in Ghana is a transformation of the structure of our economy. We need to change the mold of us being producers of raw materials and importers of finished products. And until we do that, we will continue to be affected by the boom and bust cycle of international commodity prices. We are the second largest producer of cocoa, and yet we can export our cocoa freely into the European Union, but let us process it into chocolate, and we have a problem exporting chocolate into the European Union. I mean, there are all kinds of non-tariff barriers and other things that make it difficult for us to export finished product. And so what we're saying is, we want to restructure our economy. We produce agricultural products. We want to bring some of the value addition and processing into Africa in order that we are able to find jobs for the growing number of young people. And so many years on, why would we continue to export bauxite from Ghana and have it processed into alumina somewhere else, import the alumina to feed our aluminium smelter, and then re-export the aluminium? Why can't we have an integrated bauxite and alumina plant? And we can't do this ourselves because we can't leverage the capital to be able to do it. We need to do it in partnership with the private sector, domestic or foreign. The domestic private sector is weak, so necessarily partner with foreign investors to be able to do something like this. And so there are opportunities like that in all our countries. Liberia produces a lot of rubber, so it should be one of the largest exporters of ties in this country, or other rubber products, but she's not. And so these are some of the areas we're looking at. In agribusiness, there's a lot of opportunity in Africa for processing and value addition. With education, yes, you made a very valid point. That's one of the areas that we are beginning to look at. We're turning out thousands of graduates every year, not necessarily in the areas that the job market is looking for. And so we have an oil and gas industry that is growing in Ghana. We have a services sector that is looking for specific skills. There's a demand for technicians, you know, electricians, plumbers, and so on and so forth. And yet we're producing hundreds of thousands of marketing graduates. What is there to market? You know, hundreds of thousands of MBAs, you know, how much is there to administer? You know, and so, yes, there's a structural problem. And in my State of the Nation address, I called on the educational institutions and the Association of Ghanaian Industries and Private Sector to have a meeting and come out to do a survey as to what skill sets is our job market looking for. And if we know what the skill sets they are looking for is, then we must adjust the curriculum to suit what the job market is looking for. It doesn't pay to produce hundreds of thousands of graduates when you can't find any work for them. I mean, if you turn up in front of the Unilever factory and say, I want a job, I did a degree in Roman civilization, what the hell? You're not going to get a job, definitely. And yet...
Liberia is in a rainforest. 43% of our land is in forest. We own 43% of the biodiversity in the sub-region. 26% of our land is arable. Only 2% under cultivation, because they do not have the capital or the technology to be able to move from the informal sector with production for subsistence to the place where they're producing for surplus. So while one must protect the land, particularly for communities, ensuring that they have enough for their own farming needs, etc., if you do not introduce investment in agriculture, commercial agriculture, you will never get that transformation. So you must look at this land thing within a total context and base it upon the specificity of the country concerned.
Yeah, the microphone is there we are. Good. Yeah, I think that this point is very crucial, because underlying some of the tensions sometimes that can lead to instability are grievances over governance and a perception, whether it is real or a perception, but a perception that public resources are not being used for their proper purposes. So as something to address, to make sure that the national institutions are never in the position of having that accusation used against them, to really work on addressing that is an important thing. I know that in Comoro, so the relationship in revenue sharing between the islands has been in the past a bone of contention. So that is another example perhaps of an economic issue which is really very important for peace building.
If we may leave with you one strong point made by the report. Every nation, directly or indirectly, is at risk. Evidence was happening in Syria, Egypt, Ukraine, and so it behooves us all to come up with the responses to ensure more equity, more participation, more education, and all of those things that enable every citizen to feel like they have a stake in the future, and that that stake will ensure peace, stability, and equal development to all.
Thank you very much. And of course, I am not going to speak after the President has spoken. I just would like to thank you again on behalf of the African Development Bank. Thank you.